right, let's begin the show then by focusing on Recur Club, which is Asia's largest revenue exchange. They've launched the Regreen Fund. It's got an initial commitment of about $10 million, and they aim to support and empower environmentally conscious startups. Let's understand a little bit more about their mission. We've got Eklavya Gupta, who is the founder, now joining in. Thanks so much for taking time out to begin with. So you've launched this Regreen Fund. There's an initial commitment of about $10 million. Tell us a little bit more about the kind of startups that you'll be looking at and what really will make the cut.
Absolutely. So I think this Regreen Fund has been launched to empower the sustainability mission that the India government is following, right? So India wants to reduce its carbon emission by around 45%. And to do that, I think the estimated investment volume is around $170 billion a year. Currently, India gets around $45 billion. So there's a gap of around $130 billion that needs to be filled in. To pitch in that, we are trying to do our best as we can ourselves being a growing startup. So we are financing, via this Regreen Fund, a $10 million pool that can finance startups in electric vehicles, which includes two-wheelers, three-wheelers, battery swaps, battery stations, some biofuel, biomass kind of companies, right? And also technology-enabled companies that will enable growth of EV and sustainability in India, right? People are building extremely great, IoT-linked technologies being infused in a lot of commercial buildings, a lot of residential buildings, right? Like that is helping us towards sustainability. So those would be some of the companies that we will endeavor to work with. And these capital would be for their technology development and not for the capex. I think important to understand that differentiation. So these would be some of the typical companies that we'll be wanting to work with this initial pool of capital.
So I understand, Eklavya, that these selected companies will receive growth capital, and this will dilute their overall. This will not dilute their overall equity, but they'll be able to scale their operations. So how exactly does the investment work?
Absolutely. So Reca Club is a fintech platform, right? Like we facilitate financing, as you said, growth capital and working capital for early to growth stage companies. Our idea is to do tech integrations via APIs, linking to all their financial data, operational data, banking data, right? Ingest them into our financial models. And the models throw an output which yields a financial profile and a record grade for every company, which is leveraged by investors, lenders on the platform on the other side that can be used by them to actually, provide them growth capital via the platform. So that's the genesis of the platform. We started a couple of years back. We have financed close to around 1,000 odd transactions via the platform in the last 2 years. And we are only seeing a growth in surge, right? Given the current macros, the demand for this kind of capital has significantly increased. So we are very fortunate to be in this point in time in our journey.
So you have in the past backed companies like Battery Smart as well as vVoice. How exactly have they grown? How have they managed to scale up?
Absolutely. So I think in the sustainable space, right, like the companies that we have financed via the platform, like a couple of names that you mentioned and plenty of others, right? Like companies on average have grown at least around 100% year on year plus, right? These guys are building companies in the right space with the right teams, with the right amount of capital. They know that they can scale things very well and very easily, which is what we have seen. So, 100% plus is minimum in terms of growth. Also, what we are seeing is the expansion in terms of their geographic presence, right? Like that helps them with the infusion of capital, because it's extremely important. Some of these places are not easy to build in and are unproven as well, right? Like some of the EV batteries is not a extremely well proven till date. It's growing very well and is the need of the hour for India, right? So there are some concerns that investors typically have, but based on the progress that these companies have made, it's phenomenal, right? I think a couple of companies have grown even 200% year on year, right? And at a significant base and reaching 3-digit in terms of revenues, a lot of them.
Now, given the fact that we are seeing India actively embracing sustainable financing, we're looking to transition to a net zero economy as well. How crucial, according to you, is the role of green finance, and how do you see it growing across India?
I think it's like you cannot do without it, right? Like, because to bring sustainability, you need to spend money, right? Like you need to spend on capital expenditures, whether it is changing technologies, whether it is improving infrastructure, right? Like let me call like a electric vehicle versus a normal petrol vehicle, right? You need to spend a lot on the back end to develop those technologies, to build the charging infrastructure, to build, the stations across. So it requires capital expenditure to build all of that. And if that is being provided in a timely manner, I think people can turn around well. India is fortunate enough to have really smart folks who are building in the right direction, government with the right regulatory push. But if we move cohesively and in a fast manner with the right kind of capital provided, I think it's extremely it's a you really cannot grow without it. Also, the kind of capital, right? Like typically in startups, companies were providing like 6 months, 12 months, 18 months kind of financing, right? 24 months kind of financing. But for capital expenditures like these, it is necessary to have facilities or financings that can be more longer term, right? Because the break-even period for some of these is much more longer. So their requirement is also capital, which can vary for capital expenditure specifically between 24 to 48 months, such that they can, actually recover money from the capex that they infuse. So hence it requires a different lens of capital and different structure of financing, but it is extremely important to have this.
Sure, and do you think that enough has been done by the government? There have, of course, been a lot of initiatives like green financing, green deposits, FDI for renewable energy projects. How have you looked at the government's role?
No, I think government has been extremely proactive, right? Like there have been changes that have been brought in. Obviously, it's not easy to overnight shift. As I was mentioning, that to reduce a carbon emission by 45%, if there is a gap of $135 billion, but this gap was probably $160 billion, right? Like over the last 3-4 years, so which has been covered. So we are moving in the right direction, definitely, right? But it requires time to trickle down. The policies are in the right place, right? Like with all benefits being given to corporates, to companies who are following sustainability and being net carbon neutral, as you said, right? So I think the systems, the regulations are in the right place. Obviously, there is lots to be done proactively because we are in a scenario that every 2-3 years this needs to be relooked uh, quite quickly, depending on the circumstances and the environment that we are in. But I think hats off to the Indian government, right? Like and to the global government, right? Like for that matter, in the way these people are thinking to reduce carbon emissions, right, and work towards an environmental and eco-friendly world economy.
So you have a community, I understand, of about 1,500 plus founders, and how do you plan to grow this? What kind of access do they have to industry experts? What are the ecosystem benefits?
Absolutely. So on the Reca platform, right? Like, so we have a startup community of more than 2,000 founders now, right? Like these are startup founders from SaaS companies, tech services companies, other predictable recurring revenue companies, right? Like some B2B marketplaces, e-commerce. These are some of the sectors, obviously electric vehicles that are touched upon, right? And other than financing, we also act as capital advisors, right? Like because what we realized like during our journey that early to mid-stage growth companies don't really have the financial wherewithal to balance their capital stack. So to manage that, to balance that efficiently, right? Like we have actually uh, actively appointed, internal teams who work closely to monitor strategies, growth strategies, to help them in kind of advisory, whether it is, financial advisory in some form or shape. So I think that's been a great plus. We actively help, them with the right capital solutioning at the right point in time. And that's been the winner for us, to be honest. On the investor side, we primarily work with institutional investors. These are more financial institutions like banks, NBFCs, family offices, credit funds, right? Like that want to lend and invest in different type of startups. But this is purely non-dilutive capital that we work with, via the platform. We have a community on the investor side or the investors on the other side of around 20 plus investors, which is increasing as every month, because they are also liking the fact that they get access to quality companies, right? And this is diversification for them. Technically, they have not invested or lended to startups earlier at that scale. And obviously the underwriting analytics that is being done by the platform that helps them to efficiently deploy capital in a risk adjusted manner.
All right, good to have you on board. Thank you so much, Eklavya, for joining in.